Hi everyone, welcome to Living La Vita Loca podcast, a retro gaming podcast for some of your retro gaming needs. My name is Fazz.
And I can't chew munchies quick enough.
Oh, he's speeding through that
I'm
sentence.
rich.
I'll get him. I'm rich.
Yeah.
Rich
Hi.
in munchy goodness. Hi, Rich. Welcome to the podcast. Are you okay?
Yeah, I think I bit my lip.
The risks of podcasting.
I do all my own stunts.
Yeah, who would your stunt double be? Well, obviously Mick Foley, so we all know that. It's like Mankind would be your stunt double, so which would be a great stunt double. It'd work out really well for you.
I am Mick Foley's normal society stunt double.
Going to the bank.
Yeah, nip into the chippy. The usual.
Speaking of risks of podcasting, I was just leaving my house and coming over here. And we've got two resident wood pigeons. Pigeons have featured on the podcast before. Phil and Grant, our wood pigeons that live in our front
Can you
garden.
actually tell them apart?
No. But I only knew they were so we know they live in the trees in front of our house, but I only know the back when they start shitting all over the front path. And it happened last night for the first time. And obviously the weather must have changed. Wherever they go during the winter, they go.
Yeah.
The last 3 years have been with us. But I have to run the gauntlet of they might shit on me, especially at the moment because the leaves haven't come back on the tree yet.
Yeah.
So it's just a straight branch drop down. So
It's dangerous.
but knowing they're there and the amount of poo these pigeons do, honestly, it's ridiculous. You can't help but look up and think, and then you're thinking that's probably the worst thing you could do. Look up and hope you don't get shit
caught
on.
out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you've bit your tongue, and I might run the risk of being shit on by pigeons to bring you this podcast.
Yep.
So
That is the things we do.
yeah, it's pretty fucking basic, isn't it?
It's really basic.
But they are genuine concerns in our lives. Speaking of my garden and and concerns of my life, something else that I was thinking about before. I was in the garden mowing the lawn, and my little boy Oscar was taking my other little boy Rowan's little bubble lawnmower that he's got for a walk. They were just messing around the garden.
As you do.
Yeah, messing around the garden with a lawnmower. But I noticed that Oz, so the bubble lawnmower has a little well that you pour bubble solution into, and it's got a little motor that makes bubbles blow out. I noticed that Oz just didn't understand physics in general, he was just smashing it about, as in a 6-year-old would, of a 2-year-old's sort of toy, but not realising that just by bumping it around, all of the bubble juice was going everywhere out of the well. And I was just watching him while I was mowing the lawn, and I was like, clearly you're going to run out of fucking bubble juice because you're just within a second of you moving around. And I was thinking, and then I don't know why my brain started literally moving to this immediately. I was thinking, this weekend we started playing Sonic Superstars,
Right.
between me and him, and I was thinking maybe video games are to blame for more than violence and kids smashing people on the head with hammers, manhunt, etc., etc. More that they just don't understand physics, because they're playing Sonic all the time, and all he does is play Sonic Dash on his tablet, and then he's playing Sonic Superstars this weekend with me. And Mario Wonder and stuff. No wonder, as a 6-year-old, he just thinks he can just do whatever the fuck he wants, and the physics just don't matter to the situation. And I feel like maybe his physics are broken because I've given him too much video game.
Does he think he can run really, really fast?
Yeah, he does think that. But he's genuinely, what's the word? Slow. Potentially. No, he's an alright runner. It's okay. It's probably the thing that he could do the most out of all sports, I think.
Well,
running.
that'll jumping? Some kind of jumping?
No. Switch bowling. Switch bowling, that's...
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
not real bowling, switch bowling.
Could that translate to real bowling?
Not from the bowling party we went to this weekend, it couldn't.
Right.
So,
fair.
Again, I think video games might have broken him because I think he thinks that it's okay just to use...
Flick the wrist.
Yeah, exactly. The Switch controller. It's it's gone. Whereas actually what you've got to do is roll a really quite heavy bowling ball down towards some Skittles.
He's on a fast track to some harsh life lessons, isn't he?
Yeah, this is it. So video games feel fun and loopy and lots of rings and tails can pick you up, but actually it's just a bunch of spilled bubble solution.
The end.
Yeah. There are two things I found from the exterior of my house today.
Yeah, that's good.
I thought I'd bring them to the podcast.
Yeah, no, it's very nice. That's more than I've got.
Yeah, so I don't know how we now segue into what we're going to talk about. Fighting games?
Oh no, I got one.
Okay,
go
for it. Yeah.
Physics that don't exist.
Yeah.
I am reviewing Dead or Alive 5 Plus on the PS Vita.
Nice.
With notoriously zero gravity boob physics.
Perfect. So, the boob physics and also perfect
Trust me,
segue.
the boob physics are not perfect.
Well, we've already kind of talked about Dead or Alive.
We've already
before.
touched on boobs, yes.
Was it now a guilty pleasure podcast?
Yes.
We kind of talked about it for a minute. Yeah. And I think I remember, did you use the phrase mammary flapping?
Basically, but like I was talking to my wife this week because she, said, what are you playing to review? I'm like, Dead or Alive, waiting for the penny to drop and just be like, hang on, you're doing what? And she was like, oh yeah, is that the one with the boob physics? I was like, yes, it's the one with the boob physics. But like looking at them now, they look like two like overfilled water balloons someone's left in a wobbly shopping trolley. Like they just they don't exist. They can't exist.
My son Oscar would have no chance because if the boobs were in his shopping trolley that he thought was a lawnmower, they
all
would
over.
genuinely.
In fact, that's probably where they got the physics model from. To be honest with you,
rang him up. So we're talking about Dead or Alive 5 Plus for the PlayStation Vita. Talking about, I have then subsequently gone away and looked at Dead or Alive Paradise for the PSP, which I knew nothing about.
What at all?
I still don't think I know anything about it.
Yep.
But it's quite funny. It's a funny story, actually. But then for my actual game review this week, I looked at Soul Calibur Broken Destiny. Sounds very grand. For the PSP. So should we do a Dead or Alive sandwich? Do you want to start with, get those boob physics roundly around?
Yeah, tear it off like a plaster because they are ridiculous.
Yeah. So you go first, and we'll talk fighting games, and then we'll finish off with Dead or Alive Paradise.
It is not a fighting game.
No. So you talk about Dead or Alive to me and us and everyone.
Cool. So on the old PS Vita, there weren't much in the way of like 3D fighting games like Tekken and Soul Calibur and stuff like that.
Which is weird.
Which is really weird.
That's so odd. Why did they just stop supporting the Vita?
Well,
Sony.
I think that's kind of what I've caught myself wondering, because I've got one of the Tekkens that were on PSP and the Soul Calibur that you played. And dipping my toes back in this week as just a comparison for like graphics and stuff like that. They still both look really, really good. And I think they play well. And then you look at Dead or Alive 5 on the Vita, and it's, again, like orders of magnitude better. And you're like, well, imagine what we could have had for a Tekken or a Soul Calibur. But Dead or Alive is what we get. And it's from Team Ninja and friends who do the Ninja Gaiden games.
Okay.
Which is why you've got Hayabusa in there, main characters in there. You've also got some characters from Virtua Fighter in there to lend a little bit more fighting game pedigree, I guess. But the way it works is a bit simpler than Tekken. It feels a bit more button mashy.
Okay.
But at the same time, there is a little bit of depth to it. There's a bunch of modes. You've got a story that actually has a really helpful timeline, so you can actually just see when stuff happens in relation to other things, because it's not necessarily sequential. You've got your arcade mode, you've got a pretty in-depth tutorial, all that good stuff, and you actually get into the fight, and like we kind of said about the boobs, everything's weirdly floaty.
Okay.
And at the time, and the reason I mentioned it in the Guilty Pleasures episode, was I actually played it a fair bit when I was on various coaches and trains and stuff back in the day, because unlike Tekken, it felt like you only needed basics of, a couple of button presses and a direction and stuff like that to start to build relatively good combos depending on the character you had.
Yeah.
And so there were options. If you wanted to go down the really technical route and learn a character, you could. You didn't necessarily had to. You could just sit there and mash buttons. So it felt like you could kind of self-calibrate a little bit for the kind of game you wanted. And when you are sat on a National Express coach at 3 a.m. or whatever, you just want to like mindlessly mash triangle, you can, and like actually get somewhere. So in that respect, it covered a lot of bases. But at the same time, going back to it now, I'm sitting there going, but imagine if it was Tekken. Like I kind of want a bit more meat on the bones nowadays. The fighting.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to stop you in your tracks, just because you are our resident fighting game guru. I mean, there's only 2 of us, but you certainly, if there was 10 people in this room, I would pick you out after 50 podcasts to say, actually, you've got credentials in that realm, and their favorite, some of your
not very good credentials.
But some of your favorite games are like fighting games. We've talked about that quite a bit, and it's almost like so. Not to put you on the spot, but what do you mean by that? In terms of like you were a bit like, but it doesn't feel like Tekken. It doesn't feel like as good, and I'll come on to this a little bit. Maybe that is in. I don't know how to tell the difference between a good fighting game and not necessarily.
So I was about to tell you.
Thank you. Sorry.
That's all right.
But that shows that we're not scripted, because I just fucking jumped down your throat.
Yeah. With good reason, though. So the floatiness that I alluded to a little bit, it took me a while, because I was sitting there playing it, thinking that exact question. Why am I not dissatisfied with it, but why now, going back to it in 2024, having outed it as a guilty pleasure, am I feeling kind of weirdly like I'm missing something from it, you know? And I realised that it was the floatiness. So when you go and play Ninja Gaiden, there's a lot of things like air juggles, and the characters are very, very quick, like supernaturally quick, and all that kind of stuff. And I realised that is the kind of core of the fighting like feel in this. Maybe not necessarily the mechanics, but certainly the feel. And then I went and mucked about with, I think it was Tekken 6 maybe on the PSP or something like that, trying to compare the difference. And Tekken just felt a little bit weightier. It felt a bit heavier. And I don't know if it was just the character movements were a little bit slower, or certain characters moving slower. But certainly even just the sound effects and things like that, everything felt like there was a bit more of an impact when you actually made contact compared to Dead or Alive. Which is not to say that Dead or Alive was like, someone slapping a paper bag or whatever. Like, it still has some heft. It's just that it's not the same.
Yeah.
And it's definitely something that, back in the day, my parents would watch me playing first-person shooters and say, "Oh, but you're always in a corridor," and stuff like that. And I would swear blind that there were nuances and differences that they weren't appreciating. And it's taken me...
There's a lot of fucking corridors in life.
True.
I'm always in them.
But it's taken me this long to start to be able to appreciate some of those nuances when it comes to fighting games.
Okay.
And it was actually kind of nice to sit there with 2 of them and go, okay, well, why do I prefer one over the other? What exactly is it? And I can get into Dead or Alive and control the characters better. I feel like I play it better than Tekken because I'm shit at Tekken. But I just like how Tekken feels. I like the way the characters move. You can jump, for one thing. In Dead or Alive, there's one character that has one move that puts you in a quote-unquote jump state and stuff like that.
Right. Okay.
So it fundamentally works quite differently when you're doing the movement. And it's in Dead or Alive, the movement is much more like Soul Calibur, where it feels a bit freer than Tekken does, rightly or wrongly.
I'm trying to remember what Tekken Resurrection felt like to me, comparative to Dead or Alive, as you talk about now, upcoming Soul Calibur review, and it's like I'm just trying to think that and this is why I was asking the question. And I'm gonna sound so like uncouth, but I don't ever like feel necessarily like loads of the differences between the fighting games, and that's maybe why I don't have like a massive affinity towards them. It's just because I don't always get that, but that might be because I'm looking in the wrong place for it or something like that, or it might just be it doesn't vibe with me. I don't know. I mean,
it could be any of them, but to be honest with you, I think that was where I kind of came down on Dead or Alive 5 when I was playing it in the week, because I realised that actually a large part of my draw towards it was that it was one of the sort of games where I actually, like a fighting game where I felt like I was learning it, and I was actually able to make some progress. And as a kind of beginner's fighting game, yeah, I could see that working, because you can sit there, mash a couple of buttons, and it feels like you're going to make something happen.
Okay.
There's fun stuff as well, like, the ring can change, you can knock people into stuff, and, a tiger will jump out and attack them or whatever, and all that, interesting things.
That's cool. I mean, I was like, as in, like, I was like, that's just average life when the tiger comes out at you. It's like those pigeons on my fucking garden.
But there's other stuff like, I don't get on with fighting games where you have a dedicated block button, right? Whereas in this, you have a dedicated block button, but you can also block by just pushing away from your opponent.
Yeah.
So you have the best of both worlds. You have the option, but it's also kind of a nod to the Virtua Fighter stuff where you did have a dedicated block button and things like that. So like when you start to drill into the mechanics and the kind of building blocks of how you would fight in it, it does have like a kind of a vibe of its own, but it feels like a mishmash of various different fighting game styles, with this kind of veneer of Ninja Gaiden over it. And I am explaining this so poorly.
No, you're not.
But
no. It's so hard to do. Like,
it's a difficult thing to pin down.
It makes sense to me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And so it was. Yeah, it was refreshing to go back, but at the same time, like I feel like I've moved on as a player, and I have a much better grasp in the, I don't know, call it 10 years plus since I started playing these things on the Vita. I have a much better sense of what I'm going to want to spend my time playing, fighting game wise, and certainly in terms of the Vita library, it's one of the better fighting options, I think, and the reviews at the time sort of back that up.
Yeah.
I think if you add the PSP library in and the PS1 library as well, that you can, or what you can get rather, I think it's not going to stand out as much for my tuppence worth. I have ones that I prefer more. But, it's an easy 7 out of 10 kind of a game for me. It just feels like there's that kind of quickness that I don't necessarily go for, a kind of lightness to it that I'm not a huge fan of. And yeah, like it's nice to look at, but there are some baffling things in there, and it's kind of the main reason that it's a sort of 7 out of 10 outside of the floatiness of it. So you've got a lot of DLC, a lot of costumes and stuff like that. They're almost uniformly swimsuits. There was some DLC you could get that kind of turns it into that paradise type thing, and it basically is just a bunch of videos watching some of the female characters roll around on a beach. Not at the same time, but it's like it's weirdly voyeuristic, right? Yeah. And so when you're trying to go to the lengths of saying like, oh well, these are badass female characters, and look, this one's a ninja, and all that kind of stuff. By the way, you can unlock these skimpy outfits, and those breasts are not going to stop moving. Like, you are going to get slapped in the face by them, and it's it's those sorts of things.
They're so separate from each other.
yeah, they move independently and all that kind of stuff, and it's just like, it's really odd, and like especially when you have like a kind of win pose moment where someone celebrates a little bit and looks into camera having finished their pose, and they're striking their pose, and everything is still, but the boobs keep moving. And all that, and it's just kind of...
It's the wind! It's just the wind!
It's awkward, is what it is. You feel like a filthy little pervert just picking the damn thing up to play it, which shouldn't be the case.
It is weird, isn't it? Because, like, like, we're both, red-blooded males and stuff, and it's just like, and don't get me wrong, and we spoke about this in the Guilty Pleasure podcast and stuff, like, as in, so it's like, these are made to be attractive characters in a game, and they do look attractive and stuff, but it is awkward and weird using them. That is in, like, you're right. It sounds weird, but I'd rather have some burly guys with pecs out. like as in like playing with them, than it is like almost like you just feel like a bit like you do feel odd. And I'm not trying to be like all like, you know, I guess I hate using this phrase, but I can't think of anything else right now. But it's sort of snowflakey about it all, you know, like to go and retro correct, you know, like political correctness bullshit. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying, like, whilst I'm like, oh yeah, that, you know, that character's hot and, you know, like, that's attractive and stuff. But at the same time, like, I'm like, I know playing a video game with them, I'm like, I don't really feel like I want to complete a story mode with you. Like, isn't it feels odd? It just feel like you're staring at them weirdly.
So where I came down on it is the fact that if you are going to put you can have an attractive character in a video game that doesn't have parts of their anatomy moving independent to the rest of them, like when everything's still and stuff like that. Like breasts shouldn't be moving like arms, you know, like that.
I'm
that's
freaking
the
out
thing.
to Resident Evil or Silent Hill, some shit.
And like I can imagine if you're a teenager and you're looking at it, you're like,
she's got her arms out. She's got her arms out.
Oh my god, look at that!
And I've just popped out a bra.
But then you get older and you look at it, and you're like, that is just fucking weird. And it becomes a distraction. It definitely detracts from the whole, like, the quality of the game. To the extent that, did they, like, in Dead or Alive 6, I swear I saw something somewhere about, like, you could have a slider for how ridiculous you wanted your body physics to be,
really?
and stuff like that. And, like, that's the kind of level that the that the developers are aiming at. So if you want to make it ridiculous, you can. But if you wanted to make it slightly less insane, that's an option. As far as I'm aware, that option does not exist in this game, and you are just stuck with the insanity. Incidentally, one thing that I do have here as well that was, again, why I kind of knocked points off. There's a touch battle mode.
Okay.
Where, considering the characters and the fact you see touch battle on the back of your box, you're like, oh no, just don't do that. And then you get into it, and actually it's like a first person mode where you are in one of the rings against an opponent that you've chosen, and you are doing the same moves from the actual game and all that kind of stuff. You're just using the touchscreen. Slight snag is that it is a nauseating mess. Like, it is all first person, so if you get knocked over, that camera is going rolling around.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And, like, trying to do any of the kind of, like, sure, it might be button mashy, you know, otherwise, but you're still having to, like, use directions with it and stuff like that. Trying to just mash the touch screen and do different swipes and flicks and all this kind of stuff doesn't fucking work.
I don't know of any other fighting games where you're first person apart from VR.
They have dabbled with, like,
and then obviously Punch Out kind of stuff.
Like Ultra Street Fighter 2 had like a kind of first person Hadouken kind of mode type thing that was equally baffling, but crucially not quite as nauseating. Like, it's one of those things that they've kind of dabbled with it a little bit, unless you get into the realms of, like, your 3D arena fighters and stuff like that, where you have a camera behind a character. It would kind of be the closest you'd get. But yeah, it's a rarity for a reason.
Yeah,
like,
that's what I was just thinking.
It doesn't work.
I was like, you know, I imagine you've got to build a physics engine from the ground up somehow. Like,
it's you can see why they did it, because, you know, Vita, new control schemes, etc., but it doesn't work. So yeah, easy 7 out of 10. I think you would struggle to make an argument for much more than that, really.
Yeah, but 7's good. So.
Yeah, no, it is good. And I know I've sounded reasonably down on it, but, like, as a fighting game that looks great and also does a good job of, you know, giving you something to do, it's does the job.
And so you said you'd played a little bit of Soul Calibur this week, did you?
I did.
Yeah? And that's good then, because not that I have very little to say about the game necessarily, but it's just interesting to kind of get your take on sort of, you know, like, because I haven't played any Dead or Alive, well, certainly not 5+. Played Paradise this week, and just sort of, like, you know, once I've been through it, just kind of get you feeling like what that felt like, because I know you said it, like, you know, it felt a bit quicker and maybe a bit floatier, maybe in between Tekken and Dead or Alive. I'm now the one with the veneer and you know, not really explaining it very well. So Soul Calibur, And you'll probably just tear your hair out like when I'm doing this because, like I said, like, I'm just sort of like, oh, a fighting game. I don't know what's going on. So 2009, and it's basically like a port of the PS3 version of Soul Calibur 4. I'm saying that like I read that somewhere. Like, as in, I don't know that. I just read it somewhere and I'm rehashing it in a different sentence. That's someone else's work. But yeah, so a 3D fighter on the PSP. First sort of portable. I guess like port of call for a 3D fighter. Really, that I don't think it's been done before. And it looks beautiful. It looks absolutely incredible. Like, as in, it's possibly the best looking game on the PSP that I've come across, I think, for something and I'm aware that they probably have the time and dedication to be able to do that because you are doing a very set sort of space. You've got your arena and you've got your characters, and once you've built up that sort of, I guess, the core of the game, you can then just really work on the graphics. But that's not detracting from it either. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm glad they could have done it shit and they didn't, so well done them. And yeah, if you don't know anything about Soul Calibur, as I didn't before I started playing the game, so it's weapons based, that which is obviously can be a little bit different from sometimes from the sort of the rest of the fighting games that you come across. Yeah, and I read a little bit about it's obviously something to do with two swords, like Soul Edge and Soul Calibur is part of the story. Until you would win.
It's really enjoying watching you squirm through this.
Like, honestly, this is so bad. Like, I did try and read up about it, but I was like, what is going on? There's like two swords, and it was like the only bit that I really enjoyed about that, or at least it started to like be like, oh, this is starting to resonate with me, was the guy who does a voiceover is like, two fighters will do battle over the sword's destiny, and I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. That is what the fuck's he about?
Count me in.
Yeah, no, it's in that. So it was there's some backstory, yada yada yada. Like, as in, it's a mid-90s arcade fighter that has then progressed, through Sony PlayStation, and then, you got it there on the PSP. So Broken Destiny. Like I say, it looks absolutely stunning. There wasn't a lot to it, or at least it didn't feel like to me, with my own trained eye, there wasn't you could do a quick battle, and then you could do multiplayer battles, which, for all intents and purposes, obviously he's dead now, but I read up and it said it was really good at the time, on an ad hoc basis. And then the other modes, there's like a sort of trials mode, which is a sort of small challenges, a few bits in there. And then the main mode's the gauntlet mode. The gauntlet mode being basically the training mode. And it's really weird. It's split into I think it was 34 or 35 chapters or something like that. But all those chapters were split into mini sections. I think I got about 20 chapters in before I was a bit like, I'm kind of done,
Had my fill.
Yeah, and not that I wasn't enjoying it. It's very, very funny, very comical, very Phoenix Wright, I would say. It makes me grind my teeth thinking that I'm using that as a post of comic laughter and things. It's just a bit weird, and I guess this is sort of like I want to ask you this again, be more initiated than I am. The comedy that kind of comes through in some of the sort of fighting games and things, and a lot of them having that. It's that Japanese to Western sort of translation, but a lot of it, so is it meant to be hilarious? Because it feels really, really funny in some parts. It's like, for example, is it Mokai is one of your fighters, and he's just like this guy who's in leather-clad sort of assless chaps, as in just sort of and then some of the sort of sentences would be like, leather-bound, half-naked. Fighters surround you or something like that, and they come at you, thrusting at you, and I'm like, okay, this is I'm like, cool, and other things where it sort of says, it'll tell you a bit about the story in between these chapters, and it'll say something like, oh, you can't wait to get home to your venison and horse meat, yum. And you're like, oh, this is, and But it does, exactly like
Raises
your
a
laugh.
chuckle.
Your laugh there was exactly what it does. You kind of sit there and go, "That's quite very funny,
Guffaw.
refreshing."
Yeah.
Is that the
deliberate?
norm? Or is it deliberate? Yeah, exactly. Or
but it was. I think it was deliberate. Like Soul Calibur, generally, I tend to find has quite a light tone. And so to divert very, very quickly.
No, please do.
I mucked about with this Soul Calibur, but I also dug out my copies of Soul Calibur 6 and 2. And 2 at least has like a kind of similar sort of mode, Weapon Master mode, where you can go in and unlock a load of weapons, but it's kind of dressed up like an RPG, but it's effectively a series of trials.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah. And it also has equally goofy writing behind it. And yeah, I think it is kind of deliberate, because the developers definitely know what they're doing with it. And as a sort of counterpoint, like say Dead or Alive, when it's being comical, it's not relying on wittily written text or like amusing asides or anything like that. You're getting a character that's doing like campy, overblown movements, and it's more going into sort of slapstick territory and stuff like that. So I think if you've got a line or two that raises a chuckle, and this is a flag that I will continuously fly, I think that is down to some excellent translation work.
Okay, that's what I wanted to check, because I was like, is it really, really, really good translation, which is what I kind of thought it would be. Or was it like it was so badly translated that actually it just became comical because of that? And I assumed the former.
I think if you're playing early games, you will very, very quickly get a sense of what is poor translation. All your base belong to us kind of territory. Whereas I think by the time you get up to where you are playing your Soul Caliburs and stuff like that, the art form, the art of the translation has become sophisticated and professional enough that they're able to capture the kind of intended essence of the original Japanese dialogue. So I would forever and a day argue that it was completely deliberate. Someone knew damn well what they were doing, and it's deliberately like that.
Well, that's good. And I'm really glad that you're here to be able to describe it exactly how I wanted to without being able to say the words. So goofy, but in a good way. Like goofy from, like goofy.
Certainly endearing.
Yeah. And you also said it was a bit like an RPG, and it definitely comes across that way, and it almost feels like you kind of get that ye olde English Robin Hood sort of
swashbuckling, Errol Flynn style.
Write your own adventure sort of feel to it. And that kind of kept me coming back for more during the Gauntlet sort of training mode / story mode, because, and this was probably the bit that kind of detracted for me, but I think it really worked for me probably better than it would do for yourself, because all of the story mode is, like I said, it's like those chapters, and it's put into tiny little bits, and each little bit is like 3 or 4 seconds of gameplay where it's just training you how to do something. So it'll be like, oh, this is, and to the nth degree, where it's like, this is how you do an evade roll, this is how you do a low block, this is how you do high block, and you can't progress until you do that part. Which for me, as somebody who doesn't play many fighting games, and when I do, I button mash, it was actually really great to be able to actually learn one. And it was almost like by the time I got like say just over halfway through the story, I'd probably got to the point where I was like, oh, I actually think I'm good at Soul Calibur now. Like,
I'm not mashing anymore. I'm thinking about what I'm doing before I do it.
So I'm not saying that I could maybe hold my own against that, like people that are really, really good at it around the world, etc., etc. But you kind of at least, you're like, right, okay, I could have a tactic in a fight now, and it's very rare that I'm able to say that about a fighting game that I've kind of like had a look at the story mode before and things. So yeah, that was really cool. But at the same time, also, I can see how for a veteran player it could be, this is too basic for me, and it's a bit too, it's very bitty. Like you don't you jump in and out of the loading screen every time to sort of do the next 3 seconds or 4 seconds of the block, or the the uppercut landing blow that you need to do through a block and things. It's just like, it did feel a bit, I don't know, it's hard to speak out of two sides of your mouth. Like, as in, I enjoyed it, but it was still like, just kind of felt like I was getting slowed down every time I was going in and out of it.
That makes sense. And for what it's worth, that like fighting games for a very, very long time had a problem with tutorials and getting new players in and learning them. Because you go back to the arcades and stuff like that, and you can't see a training mode for Dust or anything like that. Whereas nowadays, a lot of them will have something exactly like you've just described, where it will go into that kind of granular detail. And more they're doing that kind of thing. The only difference is, rather than taking you out of it and putting you in a loading screen to put you back in, they try to make it a bit more of a sort of seamless experience.
Yeah.
And then they would sort of scale it up, so you get to the stage where you're instead, practicing longer and longer combos and things like that. But they make an effort nowadays to go into that kind of level of detail. And even like Soul Calibur 2 had a similar thing at the start, and it didn't sound like it went into as much detail as this.
Which console did you play that?
That was GameCube.
Okay.
But it still tried to teach you some of the basics to start with, and then it would introduce more and more layers.
And I think that maybe this just no, I don't want to use the word suffer, but it probably is a bit entangled with the fact you've got to fit all this on a UND. It feels like, if this had been on a home console, you feel like this would have been the training mode, and it would have, like you said, done that flow thing.
A separate thing.
And it would have all been, it would have just been happening all in one arena at one time, and felt like a flowing process. And that would have been a training mode, and then you would have had a story mode almost. That is whereas you would have had the story in that. But at the same time, I don't want it to detract from that, because I think they do a really good job of it. As best they possibly can. And like I say, they kind of do string it together, even if it is to some, and they do lean on that comic effect quite a bit with that storyline, to the point where I was like, I'm genuinely invested in going through this training mode, and I'm getting two things from it. I'm learning how to play the game, and I'm also this is quite funny for me.
That means it was really successful.
Yeah, exactly.
It got you in and wanting to play and feeling like you were better for it, then yeah.
And then on top of that, the actual physics of the game, I've already said how good it looks. And, the fighting for me, again, being uninitiated, like it felt very smooth and slick and flowed really well, again, on the PSP, using the controls of the PSP, which is always very vital to how well a game performs or not. It was really good. All the buttons did exactly what they should do. And when you have to be in the training mode, you've got to be exactly perfect. When it's like you must do a low block, then an evade, then a high block, or something like that. That is you have to do it perfectly. If you do it perfectly, it works. Do you know what I mean? So it's like it was very responsive as a game, and also the PSP itself, which I know we don't talk much about the hardware, but this is an old console now that I got from eBay. Very responsive. It did exactly what it should do for this game. I was overall impressed with the whole package. I just felt like it was a bit like, it's weird. I feel like I'm speaking for somebody else. I feel like if I was somebody else who was a veteran gamer, and then I'd come from a home console version of this game, and then played it on the PSP, I'd be a bit like, oh, this is very lightweight. Very lightweight, a bit lightweight from what I'd want as a whole package. I kind of came into it thinking, is this a 7? Is it an 8? Is it a 9 even? Because it felt so good. But I think I'll probably settle for an 8, I think. Yep. Just because it does a really, really good job. Oh, and it looks great, and it feels great, and the controls are good. I just think there could be a little bit more to it, and it probably would have been on the home console where it maybe thrived a bit more. But for a portable fighting game, 3D fighting game, won the first cracks at it. Well done.
Yeah.
So.
I would agree with all that, up to and including the whole feels a bit light maybe on content, and that's. Not. I've seen worse, but yeah, it's. I think if anything, a compliment to how it plays, where I want more.
Yeah,
I would have more.
Yeah,
and I think that's what struck me going back and dipping my toes in, while I was also playing Dead or Alive, and the thing I kept coming back to was God, imagine if we got like a Broken Destiny 2 on Vita.
Yeah, it just
Like
doesn't make
that-
any sense that's that, you know.
I think it could have been awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been awesome. And I love the Soul Calibur series. I do. And it's one of those ones that I had a break from. I went back and I was like, my God, like how have I not played this for this long? Like, because back in the day, like on well, we would have been sort of tail end of secondary school, sort of going into sixth form kind of thing. And me and my friends would do like Winner Stays On Soul Calibur 2 on the GameCube and stuff like that. And like you were saying about the sense of humor and stuff like that, you could unlock joke weapons like brooms and stuff like that. And it's the kind of thing that like I've got a lot of
a joke weapon.
Yeah,
I would always use a broom.
But I've got a lot of really fun memories tied up in it, and it was one of the first fighting games that I actually kind of, in that respect, played competitively with my friends. And I would argue that we probably spent more time on it than Smash Bros. And we played Smash Bros a lot.
Yeah.
But it's Soul Calibur 2 that I keep coming back around to, and there is just something about how you have that kind of that weapons based 3D fighting that really appeals to me. Yeah, like the PSP version when I picked it up to have a go on it in the week, yeah, definitely more than does the job.
It'd be really interesting to kind of do a bit of it wouldn't have to be a long time because you could probably do it quite quickly, but a bit of a top 10 richest fighting games sort of like,
man,
that'd be really good.
Yeah, I could play with that.
Yeah,
I'll have a think about that.
So I'll continue along, you know, like this sort of
from the sublime to the ridiculous.
I know. Like, I don't know. I don't even know how to get to this. Dead or Alive Paradise. Right. Okay. So 2010 PSP game. So, you know, like 5 years into its lifespan. And I've never played. I don't know. I didn't know anything about this. I picked it up like dead cheap, and I was like, right, okay, it's Dead or Alive game. It's not, and I was like, what? And then obviously, like, you know, that was just so naive of me because obviously I think everybody else, everywhere else, knew that this wasn't the case. Now, I'd never played Dead or Alive Extreme Volleyball or anything on the Xbox. I've seen it. I've seen the front cover. I've been attracted to the female on the front cover. Like, as in, but then at the same time, I've always been a bit like, well, I'm not that bothered about playing, you know, a volleyball game like from characters from Dead or Alive. It sounds ridiculous. So to play this game and know nothing about it, I just can't. I can't even fucking comprehend. I couldn't comprehend, like, as in what I was in for. So it's a bit Simsy, like, as in, like, you know, and you go away. So you pick a character. It's all the female characters from Dead or Alive. You pick a character, you go away on holiday to an island called New Zack Island, of which the owner is called Zack.
Yep. Who is also from the Dead or Alive.
Yeah. And then you are there for 2 weeks. So there's a time constraint to what you need to do. I didn't know, and don't know what you need to do in this game. That is in, I've subsequently looked up a little bit of kind of what you're meant to do, but it seems like the internet doesn't know either. Like, as in, so, like, you get put on this island, you get partnered up with somebody immediately. When I read it up, it's Lisa, it's always Lisa. So, like, I think the partnering system, well, I know the partnering system is there just to play beach volleyball, which obviously is a game that I've had previously. You can do a few things. You can go to the shop and buy gifts, which you can put in specific types of gift wrap. The gifts are all swimsuits, pretty much. That is in, but there's other bits and bats. Like, and the time of the day progresses while you're doing this. So you do one thing, like an activity, if you will, like you go to the shop and buy something, and it'll go to lunchtime. You go and do another activity, which might be a mini game, which I'll get into in a second, and it'll go to dinner time. Like, as in, and then, you know, do another one, and it'll be night time, of which I'll get onto in a second as well. So you start off with a partner, and it feels like the game never really kind of explains, but it obviously starts to lead down like a route of you need to get other partners as well. Like, as in, but it doesn't say why you need to do that. Like, as in, it never tells you what you're trying to do, like, during this 2 week stay in this vacation. When I've looked it up afterwards, it seems that you're trying to unlock, what the fuck are they called? Like some like weird like video moments, which basically is just like, you know, like, so forgive me if I'm mispronouncing her name. Is it Ayane?
Ayane, maybe?
Ayane.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll say Ayane. I'd always been like, sort of had an allure with her just because of her blue hair. I've always like, she looks cool when she's fighting, etc., etc. You know, I've always liked her outfits when she's been fighting and stuff. So, like, when I say always, when I played Dead or Alive 2, I was like, right, okay, so I'll just pick her again as my character. So, like, these moments you're trying to unlock are when you go to different parts of the island or do different things. But it's just like, she'll be like scuba diving and you can just do a bit of a free camera around her doing that in a swimsuit. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, I don't fucking get this game. Like, as in, it's just so annoying to me. Like, as in, I wish someone at some point, Zach would pop up and be like, oh, hey, by the way, you're trying to do this or you're trying to do that. And the same thing happened to me with The Sims 2 on the PSP. No one really kind of explained what you were trying to do. Like, which, I get, it feels like a simulation almost in a way. It's almost like, like, it feels a bit like Truman Show. Like, as in, what are you meant to be doing in life? Who knows?
Is it the kind of era where all of that would have been buried in the manual or something, maybe?
Possibly, but at the same time, it feels like they very much could have easily just put that into the game.
It's a sentence or two, isn't it?
Yeah,
really?
it just didn't need to be, it just didn't need to be so aloof with its intentions.
It knows why you're here.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. That it knows why you're here. Like the opening video, I sent you a little snapshot of it on WhatsApp. Like, the opening video is just pornography. The graphically it looks brilliant, like, as in, but it effectively is just pornography, like, as in, it's just all the Dead or Alive girls just dancing around and like doing lots of like weird swimsuit shots, like, as in, but it felt weird looking at that on my PSP with my sleeping wife sat beside me, like, as in, like, she's there snoring away, and I'm just like,
You see, this is exactly what I was trying to get at when I mentioned Dead or Alive 5 in the Guilty Pleasures episode. Like, the Dead or Alive name comes with a lot of baggage because of the spin-offs and stuff like that.
Yeah. So, the mini-games. So you can play beach volleyball, which actually the game and the physics of the game is quite serviceable. The fucking camera angle's awful. Like, it's like down at your feet. How are you meant to see what's going on? Like, surely it should be a isometric semi-overhead view, like, as in, it just doesn't. It's so hard to play like down at like ankle level, like, and it never moves. It never moves around or anything. Like, you just like, and it's really zoomed out for a PSP. It's like really far away, but mechanically it plays pretty well. And the other mini game that I quite enjoyed, there's like a rhythm kind of jumping across a pool one called pool hopping. I believe that might have been in one of the extreme volleyball games before.
Maybe.
Because it seemed quite well fleshed out. You basically just tap each of the buttons as they come up, as they are floats across the swimming pool, but it's a race against another, or your partner, or against another one of the competitors. If you, I don't know, is there a competitor in pool hopping? I don't know, like on a vacation island. Anyway, but that's actually quite a fun game. And then the other ones, you go to the casino, in inverted commas, at night time, and you can play blackjack, you can play poker, and you can go on slot machines. Going on slot machines on this game, it just, I don't get it. Like, it's just not a game. It's just not even a thing. Like, I think I won a game of poker with aces high. Like, as in, like, I didn't even have a winning hand, and it's like, here, have a little bit of money. And all of the swimsuits, sorry, I'm on a massive rant here, but I just can't. All of the swimsuits as gifts are all really expensive, and the only way I can see that you can make money is by winning at poker. So you've got to like, gamble all of your money just to get more money, and if you fuck up, then you've got no money, and then you can't progress in the game because you need swimsuits to gift to other people. I don't understand why, because they never got to have another partner. Every time they tried to get another fucking partner, they were like, oh no, not today, thanks. And I was like, but I think I've bought you the right swimsuit from what the guide told me at the start of the game. But I haven't bought you the right thing. I haven't bought you the right food. You're annoying. This is annoying. Oh, mamma mia. Like, I just didn't... it never gave me a chance to win. Like, it was just like, and I found myself turning in at night every night going, oh, well, I'll just go to bed now. Like, as in, because it was just an easier life for the last sort of like 10 days of the holiday. Like, the amount of times I just tried to get another girl to be my partner. And it feels weird because it's like, it's clearly alluding to you almost trying to date them. Like, as in, there's also a part where, like, so you tour around the island. When I say tour around, it's like just a little loading screen. Like, one of them is go relax by the pool. And it's like, right, well, what does that do? You don't gain anything from doing that. Like, you don't actually... It's like, well, so what I'm doing is just going to sit by the pool just to see my character sit by a pool. Like, as in, like, I just... It's one of the worst games I've ever played, and I knew I'd heard. I didn't know anything about the game, but I just heard that this was a bad Dead or Alive. I didn't realise this is what it was, and therefore, like, it's the most disappointing thing to pick up and go, wow, I've got a Dead or Alive. You know, when I've played a really quite serviceable fighting game on PlayStation 2, and this is what you're giving us on the PSP in 2010. Like, it's just the audacity for a gaming company to put this out and think that it's okay to trick people into thinking that they're going to get something that is actually worth having. Like, somebody would have paid... I paid like £1.50 for this. Someone would have paid full price for this game, and it's a fucking disgrace they had to do that. Like... Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. But like that's the kind of... the thing that leaves the bad taste with a lot of the Dead or Alive stuff, because like you get past the kind of the insistence on titillation, and serviceable fighting games, I think is fair to say, and yet there is still this kind of insistence on trying out stuff like that. Like it sullies the whole series.
It's just I mean, I'm going to give it a 1 out of 10 just because the pool hopping game was fun. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I think that's
genuinely, that was a fun rhythm game, but like it makes up so little of the game. And the thing that annoys me the most is, like I said, it feels like the game needs a walkthrough. Like, it's in genuinely, like, it's the most. It upsets me when I get lost in games anyway, really. Like, I'm not like... I know I fall on the side of people think that you've got adventure and you should go and discover every single little thing, and it's incumbent on you to do so. Like, as in, that's fine. I get that. I don't really come to video games to be frustrated necessarily, though, and this is really extremely frustrating to me. Just to be... what's meant to be a relaxing holiday, inverted commas, and I am not, inverted commas, fucking relaxed. I am vexed.
I mean, one would wonder why no one packed a swimsuit.
I think they've got plenty of swimsuits. I don't think the swimsuits are, like, I don't think that's the problem. Like, as in, do you know what I mean? But like, so, like, it was really annoying because at the end of the day, it'd always be like, oh, you've got a new gift from Zach, and it's like, do you want to open it? And I'm like, well, I do, but I think but also you give me the option to re-gift it to someone else.
I don't want to give that guy the satisfaction.
It's just like, but it was bizarre. What a weird game. And, I looked it up on Metacritic afterwards, and it was like, I think it was like the third worst rated. And I'm like, there's worse games on the PSP? It was like the third worst rated game on the PSP. And yeah, it really did show. And, I mean, but it was getting like a score of like 38, and I'm like, this got like 38 out of 100. I'm like, who's giving it anything? Do you know what I mean? Like, even perverts are going to be like, well, just angry, like, as in, I would assume. You know what I mean? Like,
taken to the forums to complain about the grind.
And I still don't know. Like, a week later, I don't know what I'm meant to be doing on that game. But
wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, that I got that off my chest.
Yeah, you feel better?
I only played it for 2 hours. It's just like, that was enough to get through one playthrough of 2 weeks with one character, and I was like, wow, this is fucked.
Yeah.
But yeah, cool. Thanks for listening to that. Hopefully that was
that was something, wasn't it?
And we'll be back next week. All right.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.